I was born 1935 in Dog Yard, number 8, Dog Yard.
I was born 1927 in Dog Yard, but I think it was number 2, at the back of Billy King's, a little cottage at the back of Billy King's, what we called accumulator house. But
what was the accumulator house?
well, that was the there was originally the old Dog Inn, but that was then adapted to 2 houses, and there was a little tiny cottage on the end. Was back in my time, Billy King had it as a accumulator and done motorbikes up, repaired motorbikes. But our cottage was right at the back of that, and the toilet was at the back of Billy King's, so we had about 200-yard walk to the toilet. Yeah.
So what was the toilet facilities like?
Well, just a board with a hole in it, and the hub mount from Felming used to come and clean them out once every night with a cart, with a horse and cart. Smells, but it's he'd come into Dog Yard and clean the whole Dog Yard out.
Did you make your own paper?
Yes, ruffle it up.
Tell us how you used to go about making toilet paper.
Well, we used to have newspaper and just cut it in sheets, and then cut it in little bits, and before you used it, you used to rub it together to soften it up, because that was too stiff.
So what was it like growing up in Dog Yard?
It was lovely because it was a small community.
Yeah.
We had a tap round the yard,
Yeah.
outside number 9, and we all used to use that. There was a well at the top, which several of you filled in, didn't you?
Yeah, they filled it in. That was wooden, had a wooden top on one. I can remember having a wooden top on it, and then it had they concreted it over, because we had this one tap in the yard, but that meant the first person up in the morning, in a frosty morning, had to thaw the tap out. So you always had to keep enough water in the house to boil up to go and thaw the tap out. Our house in Dog Yard, we all had coal fires, and you all tipped the cinder muck in the yard, and I can remember as plain as anything, when it was frosty in the winter, that would all lift up and that stuck to your feet, because there was so much cinder muck. The yard was full of cinder muck, full of cinder muck.
And Granny's house had been a salt house, hadn't it? Because
Yeah.
all through the wallpaper was always wet,
Always
and
wet.
they'd curd, I don't know,
what they
fish,
cooked
I
in
suppose,
there.
years ago in there. And in what was her little parlour, that'd just be ringing, wouldn't it? And
Yeah,
it was
ringing
all
water.
salt, crystallised
On
salt.
a mild day,
Yeah.
it all would come out.
Yeah. And
Granddad had grandfather, when he had a shed, well, a big old shed, I don't know, originally near Cal Farrer's, where Cal Farrer done a shoe repair, horse repair, you know.
which was
shoe-
next to Grandad's
Yeah.
cart shed.
But
wasn't
he had he had a horse, and Granddad had a horse those days, and he used to keep the cart and horses in there, and the horse used to actually walk into the kitchen to the scullery, and then back out again for a crust of bread. Those days, the horse would actually go through the living room into the kitchen and out
That was
again,
a time.
back out.
How many rooms were in your house?
2 bedrooms upstairs, weren't
Yeah.
they, in yours?
Yeah, yeah.
And a parlour thing, and a little scullery, weren't there?
Yeah.
And ever such a
And I
tiny
know
kitchen.
George Buck done some repairs when we bought that house, went into that house afterwards, and the wall was 3 feet. The wall inside the house was 3 feet thick. 3 feet thick. He had to knock the wall down. That was made of old stones and, well, no, it wasn't brick. It was just all stones and mortar, and stone floors, because you kept the milk on the floor, stone floor, and you had a safe outside the back door to keep the meat in, keep the flies away from.
Washed outside on a bowl, on a
Yeah.
little table, didn't we? Over in the Grandad's cart shed, you had the old-fashioned mangle, and I've got my fingers in that many a time, and then Granny had to cut all the wet linen all the way down the path to this allotment, which took you right to Lime Tree Road. Do you think carting all the linen in those days?
She done washing mainly. She used to do washing for Dr. Hart and Company.
And she sort of ended up nursemaid for
Yeah.
Dr. Hart. Right in her 70s, she used to push and go to Dr. Hart's every morning, didn't she? Very friendly with the Harts. They were very good to her, weren't
Yeah,
they?
they
You know,
were.
sort of thing. Especially when Grandad went blind and couldn't work 'cause there was no money in those days, were there? No social services in those days, were there? And then remember, next to Grandad's cart shed was Farrah, wasn't it? Then Billy King came there before he went to his garage. Then Willie Smith took over, and Willie Smith used to make the props for Anglia television.
As you came into the dog yard, which was originally the old dog inn, Mrs. Colville lived one side, and Frederick, no, I don't know what his first name, Bob Wrights lived next door, and then you came to Colville's.
Barry Holden's mum and dad
Yeah.
lived in another one.
That's right.
Rainer's.
Brett lived, no, then Brett lived next to them. Mrs. Brett lived next to them.
Yeah.
Then Mrs. Rayner. Then we lived.
Were, yeah.
And then the pair houses opposite, Mrs. Appleton lived, and my granny lived.
Yeah.
And then in the corner, Esme Hannett lived, and who was next door? Oh, he was caretaker for the grammar school. Ward, Mr. Ward. He was caretaker for the grammar school those days.
And how many children did that one in that corner had? Somebody had a lot of children, didn't with just 2 bedrooms. Was that near Brett's? Or between, somebody had, didn't they?
I can't remember. I know when I was there, Esme Hannett lived there then. They didn't have many children. And then later on, Baines lived there, didn't they?
Yeah, Miss
Baines.
Bain.
Mrs. Baines.
We still had outside loos, didn't
Yeah,
we?
we
had to
still
go
had outside
round the
loos.
yard.
Yeah.
And I was 4 when we got Council House up Chinatown. Why is it called Chinatown? And why is it called Hitler's Camp? Don't know. I don't know, never did know.
That was always referred to in my time as Chinatown. Yeah.
And I think the Hitler's Camp came in the war, whether it was because we had the Polish up there, I don't know why that was called that. Mr. Chiddick, who had the shoe shop here, but before he had hair, he had one on Backton, didn't he?
Yeah, where the kissing gate was, in Dog Yard, you came out, that's the hairdressers now, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a fish shop.
There was a fish shop, it was Crass Fish Shop, and at the back of in Dog Yard they had a currant house which Mr. Colville worked, currant fish, doing kippers and whatnot. And you always knew when it had currant because the smoke coming out the top of the tiles. But there was a kissing gate there, and at the end of the kissing gate was a lamp, which I can remember them, the lamp lighter coming every night and lighting.
I can remember that.
And there was tons of bats about there, always bats flying about. And there was Chiddick's shop one side of the kissing gate, Crass Fish Shop the other, and Johnny Youngman's shop opposite.
And Mr. Chiddick, when he came here,
bought,
had shoes and used to mend the shoes. And I can remember not going to school for a week because Mother couldn't afford to buy me shoes. And at the end of the week, Mr. Chiddick let her have a pair of shoes for me. And then when she could, because Father then was on the dole, because that was a slump, and she paid him off, and I went to school. And I can remember the children all laughing because I hadn't been to school for a week because I hadn't got the shoes. But that was them days. Appleton's had number 9. And then when he got, and eventually, as they got really old, Nanny lost both their legs, and they got a council bungalow up Recreation Road, and Charlie and Betty by this time were married, and they were into number 10. We were coming out of the forces, and Father done all the paperwork. We were going to buy 9 and 10 and make it into one big house. When we come back from Germany, Father said, you won't get it, because look, I've got compulsory purchase order from the council. We went and saw Mr. Nash and said, we're coming out. We were going to have a house, we haven't got any. So we were given the house down on Whitehorse Common, and that was where we started our married life out of the forces. And Father was then given £25 for number 9 because it didn't have a bathroom. and 225 because by this time my brother had put a bathroom in number 10, and that was what. And the whole middle block is on the land, and they got nothing for the gardens that went down to Lime Tree Road. When the council then sold bits off, there's 2 or 3 bungalows on Lime Tree Road built on Grandad's and Granny's, Charlie and Betty's garden, wasn't it?
Father bought a couple and someone else, and that's how the dog yard got split up. But Chiddock bought quite a lot of that.
He had
property.
them, and he had the 2, the other side of the arch where you go through to the White Swan. He
Yeah,
fought for them
that's
as well,
right,
and
yeah.
he had. Father had somebody, a solicitor, but I don't know how he got the solicitor because he didn't have the money to pay. But he had a very good solicitor, and he got, I don't know what he got, but he did get, got a lot more money than Father did, sort of thing. Started with obviously the co-op, didn't you? The butchery was just
Yeah,
round the
everything
corner
was-
into
yeah,
Nelson Road, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Then you come there.
Benny was in the butcher shop. wasn't he?
Benny Curtis.
Yeah, Benny Curtis. Yeah.
Then we came up, and there was the hall, what used to be for the Labour thing, which is now the estate agent, didn't it? But used to go and pay something, I remember Father to belong to the Labour movement or whatever. Then we come to the Old Bears doors, and I don't know what the law was then, but I can remember on a Saturday night they used to pay the club, didn't
Yeah,
you?
pay it.
And Granny used to take me, and I can remember being hidden under you'd sat on, not chairs, benches, and I can remember being hidden under the bench if they thought the local copper was about, till Granny had her stout, and then we'd go out. I always remember that. I was only, well, up that alleyway, what we called the butchery was Mary Hawkins' clothes shop, wasn't it? And my father being in the Navy had seen her perform, I can't tell you which part, and she was a trapeze artist, and a very, very good one, because she was a very small lady, wasn't she?
She had a daughter, didn't she? That's all I can remember her daughter with glasses. I remember her.
I can't remember her.
Yeah, I remember the daughter. And they lived in a caravan, a proper gypsy caravan up the Walsham Road, on a plot of land there now where there's a bungalow now. Right opposite where these new houses are built,
Where
at the top of the
walls.
hill with walls. She lived in a caravan on a plot of land there with old apple trees. She lived in a caravan them days there.